Having a tempered glass side panel on a case that only costs $30 is a pretty rare thing to see. I thought I'd check it out and see if there's any compromises that Deepcool had to make for this case. So let's take a look and see if this $30 case is worth your consideration. Overall, first impressions of this thing are pretty good. Case comes pretty packaged well. It comes well equipped for a $30 case with all the necessary screws and mounting hardware you need. And the motherboard standoffs come pre-installed, which is always a nice touch. Now, taking a look at the inside of the case, it's actually a pretty decent place to work in with a few caveats. There's a large air tank at the front, which is decent enough to provide a decent amount of airflow to most modern components. And build quality is overall good for a case of this price point. Some other features about this case features a large hard drive bay. You can fit 3.5 inch drives along with 2.5 inch drives, and as well as that, like I mentioned, that glass side panel, which is pretty rare to see in a case of this price point. Front I/O is pretty decent. It's got a large power button, reset button, one USB 2.0 port, one USB 3.0 port, and unfortunately a headphone and microphone jack straight from the early 2000s. I wish they could have gone black with this, but that's one of the compromises that had to be made here. Now, this is a small case, and while that's not inherently a bad thing, this can be difficult to work in if you have not planned out your parts in advance. Having very little room in terms of cable management and routing options, this can be difficult if you don't have a modular power supply or you haven't built in this small of a case before. Now, one of the major complaints I do have about this case is the cable management options. At the top, there is no cutout for your CPU power cable, which is a little annoying and definitely a cost-cutting measure that I feel really wasn't necessary in this case. As well as if you have a wider motherboard or something that takes advantage of full micro ATX that uses all the standoffs, it will completely block out the cutouts for your 24-pin cable, SATA cables, USB 3.0 cable, or anything else you want to use those cutouts for. As well as another major thing to keep in mind is the size of your graphics card. Now, this is going to make or break whether you really want to buy this case, because this large hard drive bay is going to be in the way of your graphics card. Deepcool recommends a graphics card of at least 250 millimeters or less, and I would actually recommend something smaller, as unless your motherboard has the PCI Express 16X slot at the top, it's just not going to fit unless you have like a really small graphics card that's maybe like a 1-fan mini card. But most gaming graphics cards are going to be a bit too large for this case. And honestly, I'd much rather have seen a smaller hard drive bay in exchange for more GPU compatibility, as you really only put maybe 1 or 2 hard drives, at least I do in my cases, and definitely hurts the value of this case. Because for 30 bucks, you're really getting a lot here, as the airflow is excellent once you have a fan up front, and the tempered side glass panel is a nice touch, as well as overall the thing looks really clean. And I think with the right expectation and parts planning ahead of time, this can make for a nice little rig. This is a nice little case to work in, and definitely would recommend it if you have the parts to fit in this case. Otherwise, especially with that graphics card situation, that's kind of a deal breaker for most. If you have a graphics card that doesn't fit it, I would sort of stray elsewhere. But if you plan on using this for maybe a low-powered machine, or you're not going to be using a graphics card, I definitely recommend it. It was a nice little case to work in, and definitely was worth the $30 or so that I paid for this thing. Anyway, thanks if you made it this far. Hopefully this was helpful, and as always, have a good one. Bye.